Hello everybody to this new video, and in this video we are starting a new series. In this series what we are doing is we are creating a new web app that have a front end and a back end. The web app is going to be simple. It's just going to be a website where you can manage and create new alarms to use. Now it won't be too practical to use alarms on a website. You would consider making alarms on a mobile app instead of a website, but this is just for educational purposes, and it's a good project to get you up and running with the MERN stack, which we'll be using. The MERN stack, if you don't know, includes MongoDB, Node.js, Express, and React. So for this code, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code as my primary text editor. I'm going to be using MongoDB locally. As you can see here, I have MongoDB running on port 80, and that's because currently on my network the default port, which is 27017, is running into some kind of issue, so I cannot be using it. And for testing purposes, I'll be using Postman, which is not working right now, but no problem. So let's start in this episode. Let's just start by creating a basic structure for to get started with in the next video. So I'm just gonna create a new terminal. You can do that however way you want. I'm using Control Backtip, which is here, as you can see, it is the shortcut, keyboard shortcut to opening the terminal. So from this, I'm just gonna come out one, then come out one more. I'm just gonna go into the codes folder, and I'm just gonna make a new directory, mkdir, and I'm gonna call it alarm MERN stack. Okay, and I'm gonna after that's created, I'm gonna just cd into alarm MERN stack. Then I'm just gonna open it. I'm just gonna open it in the new window. So if I just code period to open it, and it should open here. Okay, now one thing I want you to know is that I'm not going to be using PowerShell. Instead, I'm going to be using Git Bash, because it's my experience that Git Bash is faster and it's better than PowerShell. Also, if you don't have Git Bash when you click here, it probably means that you don't have Git installed. There are many tutorials on how to install Git, so use them and install Git on your system to get the Git Bash option. Okay, so let's start. I'm just going to close this window. So from this from this folder we're currently in, I'm just going to create a new actually I'm going to create a new backend folder, and this backend folder is going to be our primary source of code for our backend. Okay, we are not going to start from the front end, although I'm going to create a new folder for that too. I'm just going to front end. All right, I'm going to create a new folder, but we're not going to be working with the front end right now. Instead, we're going to be doing that in a bit. For now, we're just going to be working on the backend and the implementation. Now, saying that, most of actually this project has lots of business logic, and if you don't know about business logic and application logic, there are also many good tutorials on YouTube you can check. But basically, the alarm sounding off is going to be our business logic, and storing the alarms in the database and storing what alarms each user have in the database will be our application logic. So don't worry about that much. We go just now. We're going to be working on the backend. So I'm just going to cd into the backend, and as you can see, it's similar. Most of the commands are actually similar from the terminal and the gpash. You can use the terminal PowerShell or the CMD if you want, if you are more if that's more of your liking, but I'm just going to be using this. I'm just going to start clear to clear this. So now what we can do is I'm going to initialize a package .json file. So I'm just going to say npm init y. Okay, so after I say that, I'm just going to click enter, and it should generate this package.json. Okay, so one more thing is I'm gonna add some scripts. The first script will be the start script, which would be node, then our server. I'm gonna call it server.js, the primary file for the backend, and also I'm gonna have another script for testing, which will be called dev, and it will be this node-mod server.js. Now I'm gonna save it. Now node-mod is a package that is good for testing. Now if you don't have node-mod, you can just download it by saying npm I node-mod, and because it's dev dependency, you can say /D, and if you want to install it globally, which I recommend, you should do -g for the global. I'm not going to do that because I already have it installed. Next, we should install Express. So just npm I express. I is just a short form of writing install, and so this will be Express will be our main backend Node.js framework or library. I think it's a framework, I'm not sure. Anyway, though, it will be our primary way of writing our server code, and I don't think the Wi-Fi is working quite well, and that's what the reason it's taking long. But it's not a big file. It's not that really big of a library, so I'm just gonna leave it to install, and I'm gonna come back. Okay, so Express have installed. The Wi-Fi wasn't working quite well, so I had to do something about that. So now we're back, so let's just clear this. So now we have Express, and as you can see here, it says main. The main file this is running is index.js. We don't want that. We want server.js instead. We want to save it, and we want to close it because we're not gonna be doing much here. So let's create server.js on our root directory of the backend. Now there are many ways of creating a server in JavaScript. The first one is using Node.js on its own, which is possible, but it's such a headache, and I don't recommend it. Instead, we can use Express.js, which is a library for Node.js, which gives us most of the functionalities, which by creating an extra layer of abstraction, so that we don't need to worry about the stuff like routing strings, for example, and yeah, it's a better way to do it. Express. You can also do routing with frameworks such as React, if you're using something like Next.js on your backend. But we are using the MERN stack for this implementation. so we're not gonna be worrying about that. So let's start. The first thing I want to do is I want to run this file. I want to test it, so I want to say node-mon. But if you remember, instead of saying that, we in the package.json we have a dev script, right, that will run this code. So we instead of saying node-mon server.js, we can just say npm then run for running the scripts. Then we can say dev, I believe. And if you don't have node-mon instead, it might give you an error, so be sure to install node-mon. So as you can see, it's working. And what node-mon does is each time we save this file, we don't have to refresh it. It will automatically detect the changes and show us our result in the console. Okay, let's start. First thing, we want to create the server. Okay, so we can just say const express equals require express. Now what this code does is just loading express from the node modules. When we downloaded the express, it's created a package log.json which detects everything in the node module and make sure we have the correct version, and a node module folder which is the code, the actual code for everything we're using. Okay, so we're importing the express module from express from the node modules. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to create an app from that. Okay, so we can say const app equals instead of app we can say server, which is I think more descriptive. You can say const server equals express and calling express. So we are creating, so each time we refer to our server, this will be the variable we'll be referring to. So this is where we create our server. Now our server is created technically, but we can't get access to it. Okay, in order to get access to it, we need to listen on a certain port. Okay, and to do that, we can just come here and say server, okay, dot listen. That means listen on a specific port. Now, sorry, parentheses, and the first argument this will take is the port. I'm just going to say port, and the second argument will be a callback function for when that port is loaded. Okay, so let's just console.log. Let's say server listening on port, then the port. So for now we don't have the variable port. Let's just create that. Okay, I'm just gonna come up and say const port equals we can say process.env dot port, or if there's none, you can say 8000. Okay, if we save it, now this should work. Okay, server running on port 8000. Now that means if we go to our browser and go to localhost 8000, it will be working. Now before we check that, I want to explain this process.env.port. So the process.env is just environment variables. Okay, variables which we don't want people to have access to when they view our code. Okay, so our environment variables will be stored in a .env file. So, and we need our port here, so you can say port equals 8000. So we are loading the port from the .env file, but normally we don't have access to this port. Okay, so we don't have access to the environment variables containing this port. It's on a separate file, so we need to configure it so we have access to environment variables, because there will be much useful, because for security reasons when we upload to GitHub, for example, we don't want people to access our code and find the passwords for our databases and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna come here and create a new git terminal, and I'm just gonna say npm I, then I'm gonna say .env, which is a library for Node.js, which helps us load the environment variables from the .env file to our server application. So after that is done, we can be using these successfully in our app. But I'm not gonna do this for now. I'm gonna show you how we can do that in the next video. For now, let's work on our server. Okay, if we come to Postman and create a new request here, if we can say port 8000, and we can say let's add the root, okay, and just send. If we send it, here cannot get /, okay. This is because we have the server listening on port 8000, but we are not sending anything back to the client, okay. So let's just handle something easy, some easy routing. It's not meant to be used like this, but just for testing purposes, just to see if everything's working correctly. We can say server and dot get to carry out a get request to the home page, that is /, and I'm going to take a request and the response object. Note that the order in which you put the request and response is very important. It could be a headache if you don't recognize it right now. So what we want to do is just response, that's send server working. Let's start with this. So let's save this listening on port 8000. Now if we come here and send it, server working, perfect, it works. So in the next video, we're gonna be I'm explaining the structure of our application a bit better, and maybe work on some routing and fix the .env file. I'm going to show you how and why to use them, okay. So thank you for watching. This will be all for this video. Until next time, goodbye.